Hey guys, what's up? Chris here with Cohesive Friendship Unit. Just me today. We have been enjoying the hell out of the Scorched Acres update for Risk of Rain 2, and I think at this point we are probably just about ready to pop in with our first official tier list for Scorched Acres. You'll notice this is much better audio and hopefully video than our previous tier list. So again, we are just going to be referring to all characters given any circumstance. So if you're playing solo, duos, or in a full squad of 4, we're taking all of that into account for the character. We're also taking into account just general builds, so like just thinking about what you get in a normal game, how characters synergize with items, how characters go through the progression of the game. So we're thinking about the stages, especially the new stage in Scorched Acres. All of this is going into account for how best rounded the character is in all given scenarios. So just keep that in mind while we do the list. And I do want to say, I think this game is actually fairly well balanced as a whole at the moment. Even the low tiers have definite strengths and weaknesses. It's just the top tier are, in my opinion, they hold up the best solo, and they hold up the best in squads, and they hold up the best with maybe not the most optimal item distribution. So yeah, with all that said, we're going to jump right into it. Real quick, we are doing a giveaway for a Steam copy of Ukulele. All you have to do is be subbed to the channel, so we'd super much appreciate your support. And let's just go over the previous tier list real quick. It's going to be on the screen. We had Engineer as the best in the game, followed by Multi. In mid-tier, we had Mercenary and Huntress, and low tier, we had Commando and Artificer. And let's just start at the low tier, and in some ways, not much has changed. We're going to start with the Artificer. Guys, the Artificer is actually much better now for a couple of reasons. He or she, it's kind of hard to tell, but the Artificer has this new hover ability, which is actually really good, and it's almost good enough to fully justify bumping the character up, but a few other things happened. Basically, the Artificer, I used to always have a problem with the limited movement. Like, there was no dash, there was no real speed increase. He was slow with no movement option. Now there's actually a really nice hover option, and considering the new map, that's actually really helpful. Actually, a lot of the maps can benefit greatly from this hover option, but it's still not super great movement. It's good for traveling long distances, but it's not good for moving around in like a micro combat situation. Artificer's still pretty slow. Artificer can still pack a huge punch, but at the end of the day, Artificer is still a glass cannon, which is reliant on a decent either someone who can heal or a pretty lucky kit to do super well. So unfortunately, even with the buff, Artificer is low tier. And next, we're actually bumping Mercenary down to low tier. And the reason for this is basically people got buffed, and that while the Mercenary is still a solid character, at the end of the day, Mercenary only has melee range, and there's a lot of flying enemies, and that can especially become a pain in the ass as you start losing players, as you're doing 1-player or 2-player matches. Having range definitely helps, especially with those flying enemies. And I know the Mercenary can basically fly given enough items, but again, you're kind of putting a lot of your eggs in one basket. Still a good character, but unfortunately for this patch, Mercenary is sitting in the low tier. And now let's move into the mid tier. And the first person I'm going to list is the Huntress. Now, the Huntress is kind of interesting. I actually had her in low tier, but then I thought about it. Basically, she's super good at crowd control, and her changes in this patch don't really matter that much. But I've been playing a lot of games with 4 players, and I've been noticing that Huntress's ability to locomote, to move around maps, especially the bigger maps, is super important. She can find things quickly, she can tag things More importantly, she can just like route the perimeter of the map and pick up things on the edge and work her way in the center, while the slower characters can pick up things in the center. There's definitely something to be said about that speed. And again, she's super good at dispersing large groups of enemies, just not, the full package, if you will. So mid tier, very respectable for the Huntress. And yeah, next on the list is Commando, getting actually a bump from low tier, and this is mostly just how the items work out. I think just based on kind of patches in the game and kind of having more control with those health, damage, and utility chests. Commando is always kind of like jack of all trades, master of none, and I think the way the game is evolving, the way that the chest distribution, the loot distribution is evolving, and again, the way that you can actually pick kind of what item that you're getting now, I think Commando is kind of growing, and he's actually pretty quick. He's not as quick as the Mercenary, but he's fast enough that, again, with even just one speed boost, he can really navigate the map super quick. And while the Mercenary can probably technically do it faster, still, once you consider that he actually has some range to him and a pretty decent damage per second, Commando's getting a bump up to mid tier. And here's our demotion from top tier. Still think very respectable character, someone to be reckoned with, like highest, best mid tier that you can play. We got Multi, baby, coming in with a new pod in the Scorched Acres update, in that there is no pod. Our boy Multi is the damage dealing tank in Risk of Rain 2, and one of the reasons that he got booted from top tier is because he's slow, and that's starting to show. He does have incredible range once you switch to your alternate fire. He can carry 2 items, and he can become respectable in his movement, but again, he's heavily reliant on speed items. So while he has the damage, and while he can take on bosses, and he can kind of hold his own as a solo character, when it comes down to exploring the map and finding important things, he is not really your guy. When I'm doing a lot of matches with people and there's a multi in the group, the multi almost always ends up with fewer items, just because they're slower and it's harder for them to find the items. It's harder for them to get the items. So again, multi, super good character, but got demoted to mid tier. And now we have our top tier characters, and you'll notice they are the 2 primary support characters. Let's start with the second best character, in my opinion. We're gonna go with Rex, and Rex is interesting. He's top tier because he's kind of the whole kit and caboodle. A lot of people think of the engineer as like a healing class, and while he does have that shield at the beginning of the game, that he doesn't actually have healing until you get Bustling Fungus, Fussling Bungus, Chungus Bungus. Rex, however, has healing from the very beginning, which is actually entirely unique to Risk of Rain characters. His movement is okay, all things considered. It's nothing great, but he can kind of boost himself, and he's good at crowd control, like the Huntress. Like, he has that root power that can pull people in and do a lot of damage. And he's also good at generating high DPS once you combine all of his powers. There's some great clips of him taking out level 1 bosses like in a matter of seconds. So he kind of has some very powerful strengths in that regard, but he does have some significant drawbacks where, if you're not careful, a lot of his moves do damage to himself. And if you're not good at managing that, that can be an issue, especially if you don't have maybe another healer around, or there's elites that can one-shot you. This is kind of where Rex falters, and he doesn't provide invulnerability unlike the engineer with the shield. So Rex, super good for dealing out damage, super good for crowd control, not the quickest on the field, but also extremely good for support. And number 1 again, the nerf was not able to bring the engineer down. Engineer is ranking number 1 currently, again, 2 patches in a row. They reduced the turret base damage. I personally haven't found that to be that much of a difference. Basically, engineer's biggest struggle is the movement speed, but that is not as big of an issue as Maltese. And engineer, I mean, that has it all. You're more than likely to pick up a Fussling Bungus at some point in your game, which gives you insane healing capabilities combined with your ability to throw down the shield. And if you get the item that basically allows you to double your shift item, you can just throw shields down almost non-stop without problem. You can throw down mines, you can throw down turrets, and you can attack. This is great for solo play. This is also great for group play. This is great for crowd control. This is also great for damage per second. So yeah, the engineer is still reigning supreme despite that nerf, and I don't necessarily think that's a bad thing. I still think it's good to have an engineer no matter what in your squad, whether you're, well, maybe if you're solo you can play with whoever you want, but whether you're in a 2-person group or a 4-person group, if you want to guarantee that you're going to get a decent way into the run, bring an engineer. Maybe not 2. But that's all for the tier list for Scorched Acres, guys. Again, let me know what you think down below. If you like our Risk of Rain videos, we got plenty more. There's actually a playlist that I'll have linked. And that's all from me, guys. Catch you guys next time.